The wind carried the weight of dry dust and silence across the barren plains, like a breath too tired to whisper. Jack Halston stood on his porch, boot heel grinding against the weathered wood as he chewed the end of an unlit cigar. His rifle leaned against the diaphragm, untouched but never far from reach. It was late afternoon, and the sky burned with the kind of gold that usually meant something was ending. That's when he saw her. She wasn't more than a shadow at first, rising from the shimmer of heat and grit on the road. Her figure wavered with every step, like she might collapse before she ever reached his fence. She walked with a slight limp, her belly swollen beneath dress that had once been white. One hand dragged a battered suitcase behind her, the other clutched the small of her back like she was holding herself together. Jack didn't move. He watched her come closer, his expression flat but wary. The planes didn't bring guests. Not unless trouble rode beside them. When she reached the fence, she didn't say a word. Her lips were cracked, her face covered in a thin veil of road dust and desperation. She stood there like she was deciding whether to speak or drop dead where she stood. "Water," she rasped. Jack nodded once, slowly. He turned, walked inside, and returned with a teacup. She drank like she hadn't in days, then wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve. Her eyes, blue, glassy, met his. "I need a place. Just for the night." Jack looked her over. Pregnant. Alone. No wagon. No horse. No escort. Just a suitcase and eyes that had seen hell. He could have said no. Probably should have. But instead, he leaned slightly forward and said, "Stay if you feed the horses." She blinked, confused, then nodded. The barn was where he took her, not the house. It was clean, at least, with a pile high and a cot in the corner meant for sick colts. He gave her a blanket and pointed to the stalls. "They eat at dawn. And again before dusk. You'll earn your keep, or you'll leave. That's the deal." She lowered her suitcase beside the cart, and buckled the top, and paused. Inside was nothing but 2 dresses, a worn brush, a Bible, and something folded in oilcloth. Her hand hovered over it, then shut the case quietly. "Thank you," she said, was like a sigh. He didn't answer. He'd already gone. Jack Halston hadn't let anyone stay since his wife died 4 winters back. Consumption took her slow. The child she carried never made it past the second frost. Since then, Jack lived with silence and horses. He didn't mind either. He never lied. Never asked questions. But now there was a woman in his barn who barely spoke, pregnant with someone else's burden, and she was feeding his animals like it was penance. The next morning, he watched from the window as she fumbled with the feed. The horses were wary at first, but she whispered to them. Not words, just sounds, soft and broken. "They ate." She smiled. And Jack, who hadn't seen something so human in years, turned away before it could mean anything. By evening, she had a name. "Evelyn," she said, not looking at him. They sat on opposite ends of the porch, the dusk stretching between them. "I was in Kansas City. Came here on foot." He said nothing. "I was promised marriage," she added. "He never came back from the war." Jack shifted slightly. He could still see the fire from Sherman's march when he closed his eyes. War didn't end for men like him. It just went quiet. "I have nowhere else," she said, was thin. "They wouldn't let me stay. Said I was a shame." He stared at the horizon. "Planes don't care who you shamed." "No," she replied. "But they kill you slower." He didn't argue. At sundown, he handed her a plate with bread and salted meat. She took it without thanks, but her fingers trembled around the tea. Jack noticed. But he said nothing. That night, Evelyn climbed the barn ladder to the loft and opened her suitcase again. The folded oilcloth came out this time. Inside was a letter, creased and stained. The ink had bled in places, but the signature remained clear. Silas Colwell. The name curled like smoke across the bottom. Her thumb brushed it slowly. Thandon rumbled in the distance. A howl echoed faintly through the night. She sat in the loft, pressing the letter to her chest as her eyes filled, not with fear, but with memory. The weight of betrayal. Of being left behind. Of something taken without asking, and a child she never asked to carry. Outside, the wind stirred the horses. Van of Bum neighed sharply, pawing at the ground. Jack stepped onto his porch again, shotgun in hand. His eyes scanned the dark beyond the barn, then lingered on the glowing loft window. He didn't sleep much that night. Evelyn dreamed of fire. Of men with blue coats and faces she could not see. Of a man whispering her name with a knife in his voice. When she woke, the letter had fallen to the barn floor, and her hands were clenched around her stomach like she was protecting the child from a ghost. The next morning, she worked without being told. Mucking stalls, drawing water, even mending a broken fence rail with rope and quiet determination. Jack passed her twice. Never spoke. But he watched. She never complained. Never said. At noon, she found a small wooden frame tucked into a hay bale by accident. It was all. A photo of a woman with braided hair and a boy beside her. Both smiling. Both. The morning broke over the plains with a fragile light, casting long, broken shadows across the paddocks. Jack found Evelyn already awake, hauling a heavy bucket of water from the well, her dress soaked with sweat, her breath hitching from the strain. Her hands, reddened and cracked, trembled slightly as she poured it into the horse's troughs. She didn't look up when he cast her on his way to the barn. She didn't need to. She knew he was watching. Jack said nothing as he examined the fence line, but he noticed the trail of small prints. Wolf. He crouched near a set, pressed 2 fingers against the dry earth, then stood with a frown creasing his brow. Wolves that close to the barn meant something had changed. Food was scarce. Or something worse was stirring. By noon, the sun blazed high, cruel and unforgiving. Evelyn, ignoring the swell of her belly, chopped wood near the side of the barn. She wasn't strong, but she was determined. Jack watched her from the porch, jaw clenched. She was stubborn. Wore suffering like armor. And still she worked, maybe to forget, maybe to survive. Water's low, she said finally, wiping her brow. Barrels near empty. Jack nodded and stood, taking up the reins of the small wagon. You'll come. I can carry, she replied. He looked at her belly. Not what I meant. They rode to the stream in silence, the wagon wheels ratting over dried roots and hardened earth. The land stretched out like a wound, open, quiet, waiting to bleed. Evelyn let the wind blow through her hair, eyes scanning the horizon like she was searching for something she'd never find. When they reached the creek, she jumped down before he could offer a hand. As she filled the barrel, Jack caught her staring at the water's reflection. I ever tell you, she said, he promised me we'd have a house. Chickens. Yellow curtains. Jack leaned against a rock, arms crossed. A lot of promises didn't survive the war. She gave a small, bitter laugh. He died. At least that's what they told me. But his brother, Silas, he came back. He said he'd take care of me. Said he'd do right by me. Jack's face stayed still, unreadable. He didn't, she added. He did what he wanted, and when I told the truth, no one believed me. They said I was vile. That I ruined a good man's name. Jack's grip on the saddle tightened slightly. You ran. They threw me out. Nance packed me a suitcase and said God would find me a place. This ain't what I imagined. Jack stared at the horizon. Ain't much room for imagination out here. Just things that breathe and things that die. That night the wolves came. A distant howl broke the dark, followed by the frantic cluck of chickens in the coop. Jack was out the door in seconds, rifle in hand. Evelyn stood in the doorway of the barn, eyes wide as the moonlight illuminated movement at the edge of the fence. He fired once, crack of thunder in the dark. The wolves scattered. The chickens shrieked, feathers flying. One had its throat turned clean through. Jack knelt beside it, touched the blood with 2 fingers, then stood slowly. They're getting bold, he muttered. Evelyn stepped forward, hugging herself tightly. Will they come back? Jack nodded. Always do. Until you make them stop. The next morning, Jack found her near the shed, hammering at a loose plank. Her hands bled, nails bent, but she kept swinging. You don't have to prove anything, he said. I'm not, she replied without turning. I'm just tired of feeling useless. Later, as Jack saddled a horse to check the traps on the north ridge, Evelyn came out carrying a wrapped bundle of bread. She held it out without a word. He hesitated, then took it. She whispered, I saw your photo. The boy he looked like you. Jack paused. He had his mother's eyes. I'm sorry, she said. He said nothing, then turned and rode out. By afternoon, the sun gave way to wind, and the temperature dropped. Jack returned from the ridge with a frown carved into his features. 2 traps had been sprung, but nothing inside. And someone, or something, had left signs, a pattern of broken branches, deliberate but subtle. Not wolves. Not random. A man's doing. He sat near the barn, sharpening his knife, when he felt it. The presence. Eyes. He rose slowly, walking to the edge of the trees. The wind rustled the leaves. Then he saw it, a shadow slipping between the trunks. A man. Silent, painted face, wrapped in furs. A Comanche scout. No threat in his stance, just calm observation. Jack didn't raise his weapon. He simply nodded. The scout returned the nod, then vanished. When Jack turned back, Evelyn stood behind him. Friend of yours, she asked, cautious. Not friend. Not enemy either. Just watches. He looked at me like he knew something. He probably does. That night, Evelyn sat on the porch steps, legs drawn to her chest, as Jack fixed the lantern above them. I think I'm being followed, she said suddenly. Jack froze. Why? Because last time Silas saw me, I bit his ear clean through. And when they threw me out, he left. Said I wouldn't get far. You think he's coming? I think men like him don't like to lose things they think they own. Jack lit the lantern and stared into the flame. He shows up, you go to the loft. Stay down. You think I'm just going to hide. I think you've got a child to protect. That's different than running. She didn't argue. Later that night, Evelyn unwrapped the old cloth again. The letter was smeared no. The wind had a strange stillness the next morning, as though the land itself had paused to listen. Jack knew that silence. It was the kind that came before a storm or before blood was spilled. He saddled the horses in quiet rhythm while Evelyn boiled coffee inside, her hands steady but her eyes fixed on the open plains. The barn, once just a structure, now felt like a sanctuary, but a fragile one, like glass straining and unweight. By mid-morning, a rider appeared over the ridge. Jack spotted him first, a solitary figure cutting across the field with too much purpose. His horse was lean but fast, its hooves eating the distance with every stride. Evelyn stepped onto the porch just as Jack stepped off it, rifle slung low. She didn't ask who it was. She already knew. Silas. The man dismounted slowly at the gate, brushing dust from his sleeves like he had every right to be there. His face was older now, but the arrogance hadn't aged a day. A pistol hung from his belt, too casual, too visible. He scanned the ranch, then settled his gaze on Evelyn. Well, I'll be, he drawled, grinning. Didn't think you'd make it this far, sweetheart. Evelyn didn't flinch. Jack took one step forward, planting himself between her and Silas. You had your say, Jack said calmly. Now ride on. Silas raised both hands, Mark Sarandon. Just came to talk. Heard she was here. Wanted to check on the litter. Evelyn stepped forward, voice like steel. There's nothing for you here. Silas's smile thinned. That's not how I see it. Jack's rifle shifted slightly, enough for the message to be clear. Silas's eyes lingered on the barrel, then on Evelyn's belly. Think about the child, Silas said, gaze sharpening. She'll need someone. Ain't right, her grown up without. She's not yours, Evelyn cut in. The silence after her words was heavy. Silas spat into the dust. We'll see. He turned and mounted up, tipping his head to Jack before riding off the way he came, but slower now, as if he expected someone to follow. That night, Evelyn sat inside the barn with a loaded revolver beside her cot. Jack sharpened his knife in the dark outside, his ears tuned to every creak, every rustle in the grass. The scout returned, stepping from the shadows near the fence like smoke. He didn't speak. He only pointed west, toward the hills, then raised two fingers. Jack and then stood. Two men. Maybe more. Silas hadn't come alone. They'll be here by dawn, Jack murmured when he came back in. Evelyn didn't look afraid. She looked resolved. I can fight, she said. You'll stay hidden. You said I earned my place, she reminded him. Then let me defend it. Jack didn't argue. He handed her the rifle. The ranch didn't sleep that night. Jack and Evelyn moved like ghosts, reinforcing doors, tying ropes, positioning tools that could double as weapons. The scout remained on the roof of the barn, motionless as a statue, bow slung across his back. When the first shot rang out, it wasn't a warning, it was war. Silas's men came from the trees, two of them. When fire turned the house, missing by inches. Jack returned fire, dropping behind the water trough. Evelyn scrambled through the barn, taking position behind the stacked feed sacks. The second man slipped through the rear fence. He moved fast, too fast, but Evelyn had been watching. As he passed the stalls, she raised the revolver and fired. The first shot missed. The second didn't. The man dropped hard into the hay, eyes wide with surprise. Outside, Silas charged the porch, the king low, revolver raised. Jack met him. They clashed with brutal speed, rifle knocked aside, fists colliding with bone and fury. Silas was younger, but Jack had the weight of years and grief behind him. He drove him back with a shoulder slam, sending Silas crashing through the railing. Silas scrambled up, blood streaming from his lip. "You're gonna die for her." "No," Jack growled. "I'm gonna live for her." The Comanche scout stepped into the clearing then, silent and sudden. His arrow found the second thug's shoulder before he could rise. The man screamed, stumbling back into the trees. Silas backed away slowly, pistol shaking. "You think this is over? You can't hide forever." Jack stepped closer, fists clenched. "I'm not hiding. I'm standing." Silas raised the gun, eyes wild. Evelyn stepped out from the barn then, rifle steady. "Drop it." He hesitated, then tossed the gun into the dirt. Jack tied him with rope, wrists tight. The scout disappeared again, as if he were never there. Jack looked over the ranch, over the scattered tools and spilled blood, and nodded. Dawn broke with red skies and silence. Evelyn stood barefoot in the dewy grass, hands resting on her belly, eyes scanning the distance where the riders had vanished. Her breath came heavy, not from fear, but something deeper. "It's time," she whispered. Jack didn't ask. He gathered towels, water, blankets. The barn became a room of light and sweat and pain. Hours passed like storms. Evelyn screamed once, then again, then silence. When Jack entered with a cloth, she looked up with tears on her cheeks and a small bundle cradled in her arms. "It's a girl," she whispered. Jack knelt beside her, breath caught in his throat. "She's strong," he said. "She's ours," Evelyn replied. He didn't correct her. The day passed quietly. Silas was gone, tied and delivered to the nearest post. The land, for once, felt at rest. That night, Jack sat by the fire, the baby asleep in Evelyn's arms beside him. He looked tired. The days that followed passed slowly, but each hour felt stitched with quiet purpose. The ranch, once still and haunted, breathed differently now. Jack moved with a new kind of care, pausing when he passed the barn, glancing back more often, listening for the sound of a baby's soft cry. Evelyn, though worn and healing, began to walk again, her daughter swaddled to her chest, her steps slow but grounded. The sky seemed widened somehow, like it had been holding its breath and finally exhaled. The child brought light to the darkest corners. Hope, small, soft, yet fierce in her arrival, had turned the rough edges of that place into something near sacred. Jack built a cradle out of pine wood and old leather straps. His hands, once made for rifles and rope, learned gentleness again. Evelyn watched him from the barn window, a tired smile on her lips. She never said thank you. She didn't need to. He never asked for it. At night, they sat by the fire, Evelyn swaying with hope in her arms, Jack feeding the flames with dry sedum. They spoke little, but sometimes silence said more than words could manage. "I used to believe I was cursed," Evelyn whispered one night, the child asleep on her shoulder. "That wherever I went, trouble followed. Maybe I still believe it." Jack poked at the embers. "You're not cursed. You just haven't been allowed to stay anywhere long enough to plant roots." She glanced at him. "And now? Now you have." She didn't answer, but she pulled the blanket tighter around the baby and leaned just slightly toward him. It was enough. But trouble never forgets a trail. And 2 nights later, the wind carried something sour again. Jack heard it first, a sound that didn't belong. A creak in the trees. A metallic shuffle. He rose from his bedroll and stepped out into the moonlit yard. The horses were restless. Their ears twitched. Their breathing shallow. He moved quietly along the fence line, rifle in hand, every sense sharp. The Comanche scout hadn't returned in days, and Jack felt his absence now like a missing limb. Then he saw it. Footprints. Too deep for rabbits. Too fresh for wildlife. Evelyn came up behind him, barefoot, hair loose from sleep. "What is it?" she asked softly. "Someone watching," Jack murmured. from the east tree line. She looked out at the dark where the hills met the grass. Her arms tightened around Hope. Is it him? Could be, Jack said. Or someone worse. By morning, the wind picked up. Storm clouds gathered low and heavy. Jack and Evelyn boarded the windows, secured the roof tiles, and moved the enamels inside. The baby stayed wrapped against her mother's chest the entire time, like a flame they had to shield from every gust. When the rain came, it came fast and sideways. Thunder shook the rafters, and lightning painted the plains in blue and silver. Jack stood at the barn door, watching the tree line. Waiting. The knock came just before midnight. Not a banging. A soft, slow knock on the front door of the house. Deliberate. Jack raised his rifle and opened the door 2 inches. It wasn't Silas. It was the scout. His face was soaked, his braid clung to his neck. He held something wrapped in a tattered shawl, leather, bloodstained. A pouch. He handed it to Jack without a word. Inside were 2 things, a rusted wedding ring and a folded piece of paper. It was a wanted poster. Silas Caldwell, accused of horse theft, attempted murder, assault, dead or alive. Jack looked up. The scout gave a short nod. He's coming. Jack asked. The scout pointed west. Not alone. Then, without another word, he disappeared into the storm. Jack closed the door and stared at the paper. Evelyn stepped forward, eyes wide as she read it over his shoulder. He's not going to stop, is he? No, Jack said. Not until something stops him. Evelyn took a deep breath, then looked at the barn. Then we stay. We defend what we have. Jack hesitated. If anything happens, you take Hope and you run. I won't, she said firmly. You have to. No. Not again. He saw it in her then, not stubbornness, but resolve. The kind of steel that gets forged through pain and sacrifice. He nodded slowly. They spent the next day preparing. Traps lay. Guns cleaned. Barrels filled with water. Jack taught Evelyn how to reload and then pressure, how to crouch low, how to move without sound. She learned quickly. Her hands, once clumsy, moved with growing certainty. Jack watched her and felt a strange, hollow ache. Pride. And fear. The final confrontation came 2 days later, and in the burnt orange of sunset. Silas returned, but not with a posse. Just one other man, olden, scarred, with a shotgun and a face that spoke of prison years. They didn't bother with words this time. The first shot rang out near the stable. Jack returned fire from the porch, drawing them closer. Evelyn took position behind the fence, rifle braced against the wall. Hope slept in a bunda deep within the barn, hidden beneath hay and canvas. Gunfire crackled like dry branches. Jack hit the older man in the leg. He fell, groaning, crawling behind a trough. Silas rushed forward, gun raised, charging the barn. Jack turned, too late. But Evelyn was there. She stepped out from the shadows and fired. Silas stopped. His face twisted in confusion, then pain. The bullet had hit his shoulder. He dropped to one knee. Jack reached him before he could lift the gun again. A final blow from the butt of Jack's rifle sent him down cold. The fight was over.